Hi, I'm Erin Guffin. I'm one of the student leaders. The teaching text for today is John 1:40 through 42. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah, that is the Christ," and he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You're Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated to Peter. This is the word of the Lord.
Erin Guffin, ladies and gentlemen. Truth or dare? That's what my friend said to me 10th grade year, sitting in biology class, truth or dare. And I was like, obviously dare, bro. Obviously. Pulled out a piece of gum, and he was like, "I dare you to take this aluminum wrapper, rip it in half, stuff one of the ends into this part of the socket, the other end into this side of the socket, and then touch them together." Now, if you've ever seen this happen, what normally takes place is sparks fly out, flames come out, the possibility of fire is super high. And it normally short circuits the breaker, whatever it takes on. And so whatever the breaker's on, it short circuits it, so all the lights go out on that particular breaker. And so when he said, "Dare, I dare you to do this," with all of that stuff in the back of my mind, I obviously said, "Give me the gum." And so he handed me the gum. And I ripped it in half. I stuck one end into this one into this one. And then I looked at my teacher, Miss Scudder was her name. And I was like, "Miss Scudder, I need to go to the restroom." And she was like, "Go, whatever, go." And so on the way, leaving my desk, I grabbed the pencil. The thing in the biology class, the thing that we were sitting around, it's like sitting right there. The outlet's right there. So I grabbed my pencil, take a turn, and get to the door and throw the pencil back at the outlet. And sheer luck or the grace of God, but it landed perfectly. And it hit the two pieces together. And I turned the corner, and turned the corner around the thing. And all you heard and saw were sparks flying out. The lights go out, just sparks and fire, on the backdrop of a black night because the whole classroom went out. And then just sheer screams. And I'm like, I'm going to the bathroom. And so about halfway to the bathroom, all I hear is Miss Scudder going, "Coleton!" All of that, and she didn't send me to the principal's office once. Like, all of that. I literally set her class on fire, and all the lights went out in that classroom, and I had to go reset the breaker, but she didn't send me to the principal's office. I actually looked her up, and this is a picture of her. This is 2020. It was 2003, but that's her. She doesn't work at the same school anymore. This is me as a sophomore, BT Dubs, killing it. Killing it. Had hair, folks. I used to have hair. Let's go. I was necklace bro, too. Don't ever be necklace bro. Why did I do that to myself? I don't know. But I look like a pretty well put together person lighting crap on fire. And all that. Okay, we can move off of that. Thanks. But all of that, like she was the kindest teacher. She never sent me to the office once. Never. I cheated on a test in her class. She caught me cheating on the test and did not fail me. She decided, she was like, "Hey, I'm not going to fail you. Just give me your cheat sheet. Give me your test. Come back tomorrow. Study. Come back tomorrow and take the test." And I was like, "Oh, Miss Scudder, you're so nice." And I was like, "Okay." So I did that and that kind of thing. She didn't call my parents when she knew I had skipped school, skipped her class, skipped school, wrecked and totaled my car, and came back all dirty because I had to climb out of the window of my tore-up car. And she knew all of it. And she didn't call my parents or anything like that. She was super kind. All she did, she did try and tell me. She was like, "Look, I would tell your parents the truth." Like, that's what she was like. I would just tell them exactly what happened. And I was like, "Lady, you're crazy." Like, I couldn't. I was skipping school and wrecked my car all in one day. No, thank you. I'm going to keep that one to my grave. But she was so kind. She treated me better than my behavior deserved. And she always said, like, "Coleton, you're a great student." And especially in, like, some of those moments, I was like, I I don't know that I am. Like, I think we're looking at two different folks here. Are you pointing to someone else behind me? Like, I don't think I'm the best student in the whole world, but she was so kind. And I actually sent her an email today. And it's, 2003, it's 2022 now. I sent her an email 19 years later just to say, like, hey, I was thinking about you today, which may sound weird, but I'm a preacher, and I was thinking about the story, and you were just always so kind to me, and I just wanted to express that and let you know that, like, the influence you had on me really did shape me and form me, and I still remember it to this day because you were just so kind, and you constantly spoke kindness into me, just telling me I was a better student than I actually was, and being kinder to me than my behavior actually was. And the reason I share all that is not only to show you how good looking I was as a sophomore in high school, but the reason I say all that is because in my experience with this text, what Aaron just read, that has to be what's going through the mind of Peter. And so I want you to see what's happening here, because this is the first interaction that this man, Peter, has with this man, Jesus, the first time they ever meet. And the first thing that he says is, hey, Simon, I know your name. I'm going to call you Peter, which means rock. I'm going to call you someone that's stable, someone that's firm. And so you have to imagine when Peter is telling John about this story, all of the story has already played out. Everything has already happened. Jesus has already died, on the cross, buried, rose from the dead. Peter has already denied Jesus 3 times. That has already happened. And so Peter, retelling this story, has to be reminded of the fact that, like, man, Jesus knew. Like, in this moment, he knew I was going to deny him 3 times. He knew where this was going. He knew I was going to lie, that I ever knew him 3 times. He knew it. And instead of calling me the denier, like, I know who you'll be, you liar. Like, instead of calling him that, he says, I'm going to call you rock. I'm going to call you stable. I'm going to call you firm. I'm going to call you a foundation. And to me, it had to be this thing. It was like Peter was just going like, he just constantly thought so highly of me, more highly than I deserved. He constantly spoke honor to me and so many things to me that I did not deserve. He treated me better than my behavior actually deserved. I was anything but a rock at that point, and yet he spoke those words to me. And you have to imagine Peter's the firstborn of his family, probably wanting to be stability for his family. He's the one that's going to, like, take the reins, supply for his family, and do the whole thing. He's probably wanted to be called rock his entire life. And you have this rabbi come up and say, like, hey, I know what you're going to do later in the future. I know that you'll be anything but a rock. But that's what I'm going to call you. And to me, the good news, if you're like, what was the goodness of God you experienced the first time you met Jesus? Looking back on the story, he's like, oh, the first time I met him, he was kinder to me than my behavior actually deserved. I think this is what he'd say. He thought so highly of me even though I didn't deserve it. He called me by a name of honor rather than by the name of my greatest shame. He didn't call me the denier, the one who denied me. He didn't call me the liar. He called me Peter, and he consistently called me Peter. He consistently called me rock. And this is important for us for a number of reasons, but I just have time for 2. But this is important for us for one, is that we need to really realize, and you personally need to realize, that Jesus thinks highly of you. One of my favorite authors, A.W. Tozer, we have his books out there. It says that one of the most important things about you is what you think of God, what you think when you think of God. Like, what comes to mind when you think of God is one of the most important things about you. I would add to that and say what you think God thinks of you is as equally important to your life. When you're like, what does he think of me? How does he think of me? What emotions come to his mind when he thinks of me? That is one of the most important things that you could possibly understand, and to realize that he thinks highly of you. Regardless of whether you think highly of yourself, regardless of whether you live in a high way. Peter wasn't living very highly. He definitely wasn't living as a rock, and Jesus saw him more highly than he even saw himself. But it's super, super important. And it's not just me making this up or the Bible. Like, this has been proven psychologically. There's this idea, it's called the, go to the next slide. I can't remember. The looking glass self. This sociologist, Charles Horton Cooley, says this. He says, the looking glass self is that your behavior and your self-esteem are dictated by a person's predictions of how they'll be perceived by others. Individuals develop their concept of self by observing how they are perceived by others. And the idea is what you think other people think of you shapes who you become. Like, if you think they don't like you, it will change your interaction. You'll either go into it angry and be like, I don't think they like me, so I'm just not going to like them. And it will change and modify our behavior. Or we'll try and curry their favor. I don't think they like me, so I'm going to try and become somebody that they like. Whatever we think, it might not even be real. They may like you just fine, but just because you think they don't like you, it changes your behavior. And the same is true if you think they do like you. You think they like you, you go in there, guards down, you feel very safe. This happens to us sometimes. That's what it's called, being betrayed. I thought they were my friends. I treated them like they were my friends. I took my guard down. I was vulnerable with them. I felt safe around them only to find out they're not my friends. Why? Because you thought they were something, and it changed your behavior and made you act in a certain way. And this sociologist is saying your everything is dictated not by reality itself, but what you think they think of you. And this is why it's so important that you understand very clearly God thinks highly of you. Even if you're like, how could he possibly think highly of me? He does, and we'll get to that in a second. He thinks highly of you. You have to understand this. And I think that the reason why we keep God in many ways at arm's length and we don't want anything to do with him, or we sin and feel like I can't read my Bible, I can't pray now, I can't do some of this stuff, is because what we think he thinks of us is, you sinned, I'm mad at you. And it's like, well, I can't pray now. How would he ever want to? And so it changes your behavior. I don't feel comfortable praying right now. I don't feel comfortable reading my Bible right now. I know how I've lived. I think he's probably disappointed. I don't want to hang out with somebody that's disappointed in me. I'll just keep my distance. It modifies our behavior, and it changes how we actually interact with him. And some of you are putting God off because what you think he thinks of you is so negative, and it's like you're missing out on one of the best relationships you could possibly have in your entire life because you just think that he thinks lowly of you, and he doesn't. Jesus thinks highly of you. God thinks highly of you, and he goes through the scriptures trying to testify to that truth and say that to you. I think highly of you. When humans are created, it was good, and he says that. It's not bad. It's like, well, that one's okay, but that one's kind of a mess. Not that. And then you're fearfully and wonderfully made in the Psalms. And then Jesus comes and he calls sinners his friends. And you are sinners, but he's like, that doesn't define you. I came for sinners. I came to make you righteous. I came to set you free. I came to do all of these things. And you aren't just random people. You are my friends. I think highly of you. Peter was anything but a rock, anything but stable. The man is constantly saying dumb stuff, doing stupid stuff, and then denying Jesus consistently. And Jesus keeps calling him Peter, because he thinks highly of him. He thinks more highly of Peter, and I would say to you, he thinks more highly of you than you actually think of yourself. He loves you more than you actually love yourself. You have to understand when you're engaging with him, his thoughts of you are very, very high thoughts. He is so thrilled when you ever come into his presence, whenever you think of him, when you're like, go through your week, and I'm like, I didn't think of him at all this week. I feel so bad. I feel so guilty. He must be so disappointed. He's not. He thinks very, very highly of you. Second reason we need to know this, and what Peter went through and what he's talking about. I'm not even looking at my notes. I got to get to it. Hold on. Second thing is that we need to notice is that Jesus doesn't call you by a name based on your performance. He doesn't call you by a name based on your performance. He clearly doesn't do this with Peter. He's not sitting there going like, hey, Peter, I'll call you Rock when you're crushing it. When you're actually being firm, when the other disciples are looking at you, I'll call you by the name that you deserve to be called. He doesn't do that. He doesn't call him Peter one day and then, denier the next day. He doesn't do those things. He doesn't change his name because it's not based on his performance. People who do that, and we've seen this happen, people who do that kind of thing and they call you a wuss or something, like guys, we experience this a lot. We call you a wuss or something, or we like chicken, we'll call you a chicken or something like that, or we'll call you a name. The reason they're doing that is you're acting like something and they're trying to call you a bad name based on your performance in order to make you not a wuss. Don't act like a baby. And the reason we're trying to shame you a bit is because we think you're acting like the baby, and if we shame you a bit, you won't act like a baby. Jesus isn't that way. He doesn't change your name based on, you porn watcher. He's not doing that. He doesn't look at your life and be like, well, I was going to call you beloved and son, and now I'm like, yeah, you stupid porn watcher. You failure of life. He's not trying to shame you into actually changing your behavior. He's not doing that. He wouldn't do that because, honestly, I think we know this. When someone calls you a wuss, you don't automatically love that person. Your relationship isn't growing richly. You're just like, look, don't call me that. Like, you get angry. It doesn't change you long term. It doesn't actually do anything good in your life. It might spur you for a second, but long-term change, Does not actually take place when people call you, thanks for calling me a baby. Now my whole life has changed. Jesus knows that does not lead to the transformation that I'm longing for. And for Peter, he doesn't do that. He's like, you are this. I am calling this out of you. This is who you are. Jesus recognizes that what actually changes you is him just defining you and giving you definition by giving you a name. Jesus doesn't. When you struggle with sin, he doesn't call you the hypocrite. Oh, look at you, you little hypocrite. He doesn't do that. Not trying to shame you. He doesn't call you gross when you have gross thoughts. When you stumble, he doesn't call you, oh, you're almost worthy of love. Get a little better. Almost worthy. I almost love you. Nobody loves that person. Nobody wants to be around somebody that's like, you'll just earn it. Just do a little bit more, work a little harder, then you'll love me. When you doubt, he doesn't call you the faithless one. When you fail over and over again with the same sin, he doesn't call you a failure. He doesn't call you dumb. He doesn't call you stupid. He doesn't call you annoying. He loves you. And he recognizes that the things and people that do that are trying to change you by shaming you or making fun of you or something. And he's like, that's just not, I love you too much to do that, and I know that doesn't work. I don't call you by your performance or how well you're doing. I call you by the name that I call you. I base my call on you on my performance, not yours. And so my name for you won't change because my performance is solid and through. You can be a son of God because I was a perfect son to God. And so I just replaced, when you fail, you actually get my sonship onto you, and so you have it. You can be called righteous not because you're living righteously, but because he did live righteously. And all he's done is he's like, I crushed it for you. I'm just going to give this to you. He doesn't call you based on your performance. He calls you based on his. And for Peter, he called him Peter in many ways, because there was the calling that he had on his life. He's like, I want you to be, this is who I see you to be. This is who you're created to be. You were created. Yes, you're dealing with sin and all the rest of it, and it's going to mess with you, but you were created to be this firm, rock, solid thing for the church. I am calling you who you were created to be. This is who you were created to be. This is who I'm calling you, and I will continue to call that, and I will work with you until this becomes reality. And if you follow Peter's life, eventually that takes shape, and he becomes a rock for the church itself. And he still fails there, consistently all the way through. But Jesus is like, this is who you were made to be, and so I'm going to call you who you were made to be and not try to shame you into being who you were made to be. Let me just call you by your name. I will call you Peter. And for us, this is what he calls us. There's a lot. I just did just a riff through what he calls us. But here's a couple of the things. This is what he calls you. He calls you my image bearer. He calls you, you are my handiwork. You are chosen. You are royalty. You're a priest or priestess of God, which means that you help others see and encounter God, whether you are a man or a woman. You're a priest or a priestess. He says, you are mine. You're a son or you're a daughter. You are God's dwelling place. You are a new creation, not defined by your old self or not defined by your old sins, not defined by your biggest mistakes. You are a new creation. You are more than conquerors. You're fearfully, wonderfully made. You are loved. You're light of the world, salt of the earth. You're righteous. You're a citizen of heaven. You're a friend of God. You're holy. Even when you don't live holy, you are holy. You are beloved. You are spiritually gifted. You're strong even when you're weak. You're forgiven. You're saints. I saw somebody ask at the Q&R last time about the saints. You are a saint. You're made saints in Christ Jesus, not because you're sinless or because you've done these great things, because he has dubbed you that. You're welcomed. You're cared for by God. You're valuable to God. You're known by God. You're saved by grace. Oh, I forgot to put the text there. You're saved by grace. He doesn't call you. Those are the things that he calls you when he thinks of you. Notice none of them are negative. None of them are like, you piece of garbage. Like, he's not doing that. Because he recognizes that if I called you that, it wouldn't actually make you want to be, it might. It might make some of you be like, I'm going to not be a piece of garbage today. And then when you are a piece of garbage, you're like, man, I actually might be a piece of garbage today. and then it just beats you down, and you try and raise yourself up to this place where you finally matter to God. And he's like, this won't ever work that way. It has to work the other way. I will call you by the name that I've called you, so that you will actually be brought into who you actually are. Because if you don't understand that I see you this way, you'll never actually become this thing, because you won't get close to me enough to where I can actually lead you into this space. And if you don't begin to recognize that this is your identity, all of a sudden I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you don't see these things as this is who you are, somebody else will define you. And mostly it will be you. You will define yourself. And you just think lower of yourself than he does. He actually thinks more highly of you than you think of yourself. For us, one of the things that we need to do is that we need to start calling ourselves by our new name. Call yourself by the new name. What you call yourself matters. There was a study done about these people who were trying to quit smoking. And I've said this before, but the study done about people trying to quit smoking, and they gave them two different options, basically, of like, say this or say this. And so the next time you're offered a cigarette, one of the groups had to say, I'm trying to quit. Thank you for offering me a cigarette, but I'm trying to quit. The other one had to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not a smoker. I'm a non-smoker. And so that's what they did. They did the study. You say this, you say that. I'm trying to quit. I'm a non-smoker. And then when they got back to it and they tested all the people, like, okay, how'd it go? 3 months in, how many of you went back to it? And like 75 to 80% of people who said they were trying to quit went back and smoked cigarettes. But then 75 to 80% on this side didn't go back. And the only thing that changed was what they called themselves. I define myself as I'm a smoker, but I'm trying to quit. And these people said, I'm not a smoker. The only thing that changed was their name. The only thing that changed is what they called themselves. And what you call yourself matters. This is why you were called. I gave you a plethora, a little bit. There are so many more names of what he calls you. What you call yourself matters, and this is why he goes to a great length to actually tell you, this is who you are. Your identity matters, and you need to see yourself the way that I see you. I think one of the best ways that we see this is in the Apostle Peter's life all the way through. So at the beginning of his life, he's called Peter, or the beginning of his time with Jesus. And then when you get to his letter, Peter writes a letter, actually 2 in the Bible, pretty strong if you're, Peter. But notice the first word. He calls himself the first word. How do you define yourself now? Oh, I'm just Peter. I'm Peter. I'm not Simon. I don't go back to that old name. When I sign my name to something now, this is who I am. Regardless of whether I actually live that out, regardless of how well I do, my name is Peter. I call myself by what he called me. He named me. He claimed me, and therefore I will be that from here on forever, regardless of my performance. He calls himself Peter. It matters what you call yourself. And this is why, go to the next slide. This is why he gives us all these different things. To call yourself by these names. To look at it and go like, man, when I feel like I am just failing, when I feel like I'm not bearing any good image, I feel ugly, I feel covered in sin, it's like you are still my image bearer. You still bear the image of God. I don't feel like I'm righteous, but I took on your sin so that you become the righteousness of God. I don't feel like you're close. It's like, actually though, but you're someone who will never be forsaken. I don't feel like I'm somebody who's strong in faith. It's like, but you are rich in faith. You are someone who is faithful. You are somebody like this. You are a saint. You are welcomed. You are cared for by God. You are all these. I feel like he's abandoned me. No, you're cared for. I feel like I don't matter to him. No, you're valuable to him. And you need to remind yourself of these things, and you start calling yourself by these names. He has named you. And if you don't call yourself by one of these, again, you will eventually name yourself, and it'll be far less. Many times what happens is we go through our lives and we deal with some of this stuff that goes on, and what we begin calling ourselves is like, I'm a failure, I'm a mistake, I'm too far gone, there's no way I could be forgiven, I'm unforgiven, I don't feel God's presence, therefore I must be abandoned. I feel like that God's not speaking to me, he must not love me, I'm not loved. I feel alone, I feel like I've failed, and therefore I'm ashamed, I'm guilty, I'm fearful, I'm anxious. Those are the names that we give ourselves. And most often, we look at our performance and then give ourselves a name, and he just doesn't do that. He looks at his performance, and he's like, I did pretty good. Perfect, actually. And so I'm going to call you by the name that I give you because your name isn't based on your performance. You might think of yourself as a screw-up, but to me, you are the delight of the Father. You are a son, you are a friend, you're a daughter. This is who you are. And so for you, you need to recognize very deeply, he thinks more highly of you than you think of yourself, and maybe even more highly than you deserve. And he's someone that actually draw close to, because those are the people that think highly of us. Those are the people we want to be close to. Every time we're around them, we just feel better about ourselves. This is who Jesus is. He's not someone that you get there and you're like, man, I did a bunch of wrong stuff. And he's like, I know, you piece of crap. Like, that's not what he says. He's like, man, you're here. I'm so glad you're here. I'm proud of you. You're my son. You're my daughter. But I did all this stuff. Yeah, I know. I covered all that, though. We're good to go. We're fine here. Let's move forward. You need to know that stuff didn't separate you from my love for you. That stuff didn't leave you out here and me over here. Doesn't make me want to leave you. It actually makes me want to get close to you. This is who you are to me. He thinks very, very highly of you. And then you need to recognize that you are not called a name based on your performance. So don't call yourself based on your performance, because you'll always get it wrong. In your small group, I want you to deal with the question, what name that Jesus calls you do you like the most? And so, small group leaders, to have a picture of this would be super helpful. I tried to put it in the question, but they're different than that one up there. There might be some more in here that are different too, but just deal with that, please. I would love for you to deal with that thing. Which one do you like the most that he would call you? Christian or not, if you're like, I don't even know if Jesus is real, that's fine. Just answer the question. I'm not asking you to commit to something, although I would encourage you. No one has ever thought more highly of you than Jesus does. And so I don't know why you'd wait to not just go like, hey, I actually want to be in relationship with someone that sees me better than I even see myself. And so I want you to deal with that question. Which one of these names you're like, man, I like that one, or I need that one the most? Let me pray, and then Hannah is going to come up and lead us in a song. Father, thank you for Peter's story. Thank you that the first thing that you said to him was that you called him something that he knew clearly, that is not who I am. But you made him into that, and you were patient with him. And God, you call us by names that we look at and go, I'm not holy. I am anything but holy. I am not righteous. I am anything but righteous. I don't feel lovable. I don't feel like you care. But Lord, you call us that anyways. Those are our names. And so, Father, I pray that we would preach that to our own hearts. I pray that we preach that to the own darkness and our own doubts that we have. This is who he says I am. And God, I pray that it would rest in our hearts and be something that actually shapes us and forms us. That it would be, this is my identity. No longer am I that old, ugly thing that I called myself, but now I'm beautiful, fearfully, wonderfully made. I'm purposed. I'm the handiwork of God. He created me to do great things, and he's going to call me into them. God, I pray that that would be the story of our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all can stand up. We're going to sing. And I just want to encourage you. If you need prayer, one of the things we've been doing during this space is like if you want somebody to pray for you, if you want to just tell a story of like what you're walking through, you just need somebody to listen in the dark. We'll be in the back and to the sides here. Your leaders will be. And so you got a bunch of your small group leaders and all that kind of stuff. And if you're new here and you don't know anybody, there'll be people in the back. Look for an adult. I have bald hair. Nope, I have bald head. So I'm easy to find. But we'd love to pray for you. We'd love to hear your story. If you just need to be reminded here's what I've done. I don't feel like I am a child of God. Let us remind you. Let us tell you who you actually are. Sometimes you need somebody else to speak it to you. But don't be nervous of walking back there and talking to one of your leaders and just saying those things. Come talk to us. We'd love to do that. This is a time of response, not just to sing, but to come for prayer. And so we'd love to pray for you. There'll be people in the back of the room. And Ben's here to your right. Carol Ann's here to your left. So if you need prayer, go forward or go backwards. You can't go wrong. Just go one way or the other. But we'd love to pray for you.
You unravel me with a melody.